Hello and welcome to the Muslim Debate Initiative discussion, The Problem of Evil. This event is hosted by Muslim Debate Initiative, an intellectual, political and theological initiative formed by experienced Muslim researchers, debaters, speakers, aimed at encouraging inter-community debate, discussion and dialogue. MDI believes that only through frank and open discussion can we reach mutual understanding, relations between different communities be improved, and hopefully the breaking down of prejudice and false conceptions. It is with this in mind that I'd like to invite our speakers to present their cases on the problem of evil. But first, let me introduce them to you. On my right, and I think your left, is Farhan Qureshi. Farhan Qureshi was born and raised in the United States of America to the Ahmadiyya or Qadiyani community. At the age of 17, citing inconsistencies in the Ahmadiyya tradition and spiritual experiences at a Sunni masjid, Farhan converted to Sunni Islam. Farhan would primarily involve himself in dawah work and debate with Qadianis defending the doctrine of the finality of the prophethood, or what's called Khatam Nubuwah, but expanded his efforts to Christians after a Qadiani he knew converted to Christianity, namely Nabil Qureshi, who we're told there's no relation. The two would engage in what would be, for both, of their first debates in 2006. After 10 years of practicing Sunni Islam in 2011, Farhan would leave Islam altogether due to his struggles with the doctrine of hell and evil. Farhan claims to be an agnostic and claims to maintain a positive attitude towards Islam and Muslims, saying that it's a beautiful wisdom tradition, but no longer believes in Islam, no longer believes that Islam is the ultimate reality behind our existence. Currently, Farhan works in mental health and has done so for 4 years. Farhan attends a Unitarian Universalism congregation in Washington, D.C. that consists of atheists, humanists, agnostics, and theists. While maintaining his position as an agnostic, he is also learning Eastern spirituality from a Buddhist monk and Hindu guru. Farhan continues to engage in debates and speak at campuses, churches, and radio programs against exclusivity doctrines, particularly Christian and Muslim exclusivity claims. And Farhan also advocates spirituality for non-theists. Examples of this include his engagement with an atheist crowd at Skeptic Camp, DC, held at the University of Maryland, on the topic of spirituality and esotericism. A debate with a senior pastor of the Cross Valley Chapel in Frederick, Maryland, on the doctrine of hell on WFMD radio, and has planned upcoming agreed debates with Christian and Muslim apologists in the United States. Farhan is also a contributor to Faith Freedom International, where he writes articles on topics related to Islam. As our second speaker, Sami Zaatari, who is on my left and your right. Sami Zaatari has been involved in Islamic apologetics for the past 6 years and has taken part in public debates in both the UK and the US. He runs 2 websites, muslim-responses.com and ilovemuhammad.com, both of which have received hundreds of thousands of hits. Sami also launched the Honor the Prophet Muhammad campaign in response to Draw Muhammad Day, which thus far has received over 300,000 members on Facebook. The page can be found on Facebook by simply searching in Honor the Prophet Muhammad campaign. Sami is currently a speaker for the Muslim the public debate platform, the Muslim Debate Initiative. So that's about our speakers. Now about this event today. The event will proceed as follows. Both speakers will be given a 20-minute format to make their presentations. This will be followed by 10 minutes each for rebuttals and 6 minutes each for second rebuttals. This will then be followed by a 30 minutes questions and answers. And at the end, there'll be a 5-minute summary presented by both speakers. I'd like to explain a bit about the rules this evening. No one shall shout, jeer, or disrupt the speakers while they are speaking. Anyone who wishes to make comments should save them for later during the audience participation session. Applause is allowed at the end of each of the speakers' discussion. We would like to remind everyone that in accordance with the Islamic principles of Muslim Debate Initiative and the commonly understood principles of the etiquette of discussion, that we should respect everyone's right to hold opinions and express them, even the most unpalatable ones, as long as they are expressed sincerely and for intellectually serious purposes and not gratuitously and in a disrespectful fashion. We hope you enjoy this evening and gain a deeper insight into this fascinating topic of the problem of evil. Now, without much further ado, I'd like to present the first speaker, which was agreed with Sami Zaatari. So you have 20 minutes. Starting from now.
All right.
Hang on a second. Okay, that's time's up. Oh, I think you put.
Use yours.
No, that's all right. It's all right.
All right. Thanks for that introduction. Now, before I start with the debate, I'd just like to make something clear, because whenever you debate the topic of evil, good and bad, morals, an assumption is often made that the atheist or the agnostic side have no morals, and that's not what I'm trying to argue. I mean, it's a fact of life that atheists and agnostics are good people. They do have morals. Some of them even may be more morally better than theists. So I'm not on this stage or on this platform to try to somehow argue that the theists are more moral than the atheists. And at the same time, I'm not trying to put myself forward as an example of moral guidance or moral principles, because I'm a human, I have my own shortcomings, I have my own deficiencies, and so forth and so forth. I mean, I do a lot of debates, I make a lot of videos, I write a lot of articles, and in none of those things will you ever see me personally put myself forward as a moral example. I never tell anybody to look at me as somehow being this moral principle that everybody should follow. So I need to make that point very clear. I'm not trying to be on here saying I'm this perfectly uprighteous person and the atheist and agnostic isn't. That's not the topic or what I'm trying to portray. And it often gets confused. You often see a lot of theist, agnostic debates on this issue, and people say, oh, the other side has no morals, and this side has all the morals. That's not the point of the discussion. But now the problem of evil. What is evil, you know? First of all, the question is often asked with an assumption that there's a definition. Now, on the theist side, we have a definition of evil, and I'll get to that. But I want to first establish the point that atheists and agnostics, it doesn't really matter which one. When it comes to this issue, it's practically the same. Atheists and agnostics don't have a consistent definition of what evil is. And so, whenever an atheist comes up to me and they point their finger, they always try to use the argument of evil as an argument. And I thought about it for a second, and I made a video on this. I said, wait a minute, you keep bringing up the point of evil, yet you can't even properly define what evil is. So before you want to debate the topic, why don't you give me a proper, consistent concept of what evil is? Now, they have given me a response. According to the atheist agnostic worldview, good and bad, evil and righteousness is all subjective. It's basically, you might think something is good, and he might think something is bad, and that's how it is. It's all relative, it's all subjective. So, as one honest atheist himself said, evil doesn't even exist, which is true. In this worldview, where everything is subjective, there is no good and bad. Evil does not exist. That's the conclusion we'd have to reach based on that definition. Now, there's more problems for the atheist and agnostic because they come from a materialistic worldview. They come from that pure materialistic worldview. And furthermore, according to their materialistic worldview, everything as in human life is a result of biological evolution that took place over a vast period of time. So what is evolution? Evolution, ladies and gentlemen, is simply the process of living organisms evolving over time and adapting to their surroundings for the better. Basically, to become stronger. And why to become stronger? To survive. It's all about increasing your chances of survival and getting better over time, adapting to your inhabitants or habitat. The entire function of evolution is simply about survival. Evolution doesn't have sympathy. Evolution doesn't have empathy. Evolution doesn't care about any of these things. They don't even exist in an evolutionary biological sense. Such terms don't exist. It's all about survival. So I want you to keep these points in mind. According to the materialistic worldview, everything is about evolution. Evolution is all about survival. Now, according to scientists, this is actual facts. According to scientists, this planet is overpopulated. There are too many people on this planet, and we're growing even larger. Now, why is that a problem? Because on this planet, we consume resources. Now, think about it. Limited resources with an unlimited amount of population growth, what does that lead to? That leads to problems. That leads to problems for our survival. Because the more people there are, the more resources they use, and that's a problem. I mean, they're even talking about in a few years, in a few decades, there are going to be wars and conflict over something like water, because there's not going to be enough for everybody. So that's going to lead to a lot of problems. Now, therefore, in the interest of survival, if I'm coming from a purely materialistic evolutionary worldview, I shouldn't help poor people. Because if I help those poor people, I am giving them resources that I need. I am decreasing resources, and when I decrease these resources, I diminish my own survival rate. So therefore, again, what is evolution all about? Evolution is all about survival. So in the interest of this materialistic evolutionary world, I shouldn't care about those poor people. I should only care about myself and ensuring my own well-being and my own survival. So they shouldn't have any of those resources. In fact, we should even have population control. We should decrease the population just to protect the resources. And now I know this sounds crazy, but there are people who actually advocate this. You can go on the internet and find such writings very easily of people talking about population control, how we have to decrease the population, and so forth and so forth. Now I agree, most atheists and agnostics don't accept this worldview. They don't accept what I'm saying. And that's a good thing. As I said, they're moral people. But even though they don't accept it, they have no rational basis for rejecting it. They often tell me the reason why we help poor people is because we have sympathy and empathy. But remember, evolution doesn't have any of those things. Evolution doesn't have sympathy. Evolution doesn't have empathy. Evolution is all about survival. So if we want to be consistent and we want to argue from a purely materialistic worldview, then you should go what I'm saying. If I was truly a materialistic person who believed in this, Farhan would have no case against me. Because think about it, I have the facts. The population is growing, our resources are getting limited. Over time, this leads to extinction. In the best interest of survival, we should get rid of those people and we should not help them. What will be his response? Sympathy, empathy? Those are not factual responses to my factual arguments. So the materialistic worldview is filled with these problems, which is why atheists and agnostics even have to move away from it without any rational basis. It's only through a metaphysical worldview, i.e. a worldview where you believe in God, it's only through this worldview that helping a poor person makes sense. Because in the metaphysical worldview, there's a greater purpose, there's a greater good. Human life has a value to it. Humans have a value to it. It's not simply about myself or my close ones and my own resources. In a metaphysical worldview, you have to help everybody. You have to share with everybody, not simply thinking about yourself. And practically all theistic philosophies, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and so forth, they all have this purpose and principle of helping the weak, helping the poor, helping those less fortunate than you, and so forth and so forth. Why? Because there's a purpose to it. There's a greater good. And it's only through the metaphysical purpose where this makes sense. But from a purely materialistic evolutionary worldview, it's basically survival of the fittest. It's basically about my own survival. And that's a big problem. Now, secondly, atheist and agnostic reasons for why we do good. You see, they come up with responses. Why do we do good? According to, as I said, for theists, we have a metaphysical purpose. Religion, God, the greater good. Atheists have tried to come up with their own responses. For instance, one famous atheist argument is that the reason why we do good, the reason why I help this poor person, is because if I help him, he'll help me. Basically, mutual benefit. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. So that's basically why we help each other. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. Think about how selfish that is. The only reason you help somebody is because they help you in return. Now, from a materialistic worldview, that makes sense. If you come from a materialistic worldview, you must think like that. You would be forced to think like that because your needs come before everybody else. So the only reason why I help you is because eventually I'm doing it for myself, and a means to an end. But again, that's so selfish, isn't it? I just help you to help me. But that response doesn't make sense, because think of it. If I help a poor person who's really poor, he's never going to be able to help me back. Most poor people can't pay me back. All right, if an atheist is not satisfied with that, how about an animal? If I help an animal, how in the world is that animal going to scratch my back? And there's a very famous hadith of the Prophet. There was a prostitute, and she saw a cat who was thirsty. So she went down the well to get water for this cat, and she was forgiven, and she was granted paradise based on that act. So according to our religion, we should help animals. Now, how in the world is an animal going to scratch my back if I help it? There is no mutual benefit at all for helping an animal or a poor person. So that argument goes down the drain. Another reason for doing good, according to the materialistic worldview, is that we do good only because we want to feel better about ourselves. So the only reason why I do charity is because I want to feel good about myself. Again, think about how selfish that is. You only help someone, not because you care about them, but because you want to feel better about yourself. Now, from a materialistic worldview, that makes sense. But now again, when you help out somebody, do you do it because you want to feel good about yourself? Or do you do it because you actually care? When I do charity, when I help somebody, I do it because I care about them. Not because I simply want to feel better about myself. Now sure, when I help somebody, I feel good. But the reason why I feel good is not for the sake of wanting to feel good, but it's because I know I did something right. I helped that poor person, so that's why I did good, or I feel good. And the reason why I want to help that person is because there's a metaphysical purpose, there's a greater good. You need to help your fellow man. I'm not doing it simply because I'm selfish and I just want to feel better about myself. I mean, we go to shops to buy clothes to feel better about ourselves. Are you comparing that with helping a poor person? You see how selfish it is and how major problems you have with this worldview. Now, as to the question, why does evil exist? It's very simple. God has given man and woman free will. The free will and right to choose from good and bad. So you're free. You have a free will. Now, if you have free will doesn't mean anything without good and bad. Because if there's only good, then you don't really have a free will, and rewards and righteousness are empty. It is only with bad that these terms make sense and has a value to it. Now, it's not a problem. That's the thing. Atheists bring this up as a problem. And this is what makes me say the entire atheist argument is a straw man. Because theists have never said that humans are perfect. Theists, in fact, accept it as a way of life that there is bad, that we are imperfect, that bad things do happen. So what's the problem? There is no problem. The entire argument is based on a straw man. And this all comes back to the first point. The atheist agnostic doesn't even have a definition of what evil is. So I don't want you to ignore that point. We're going to talk about evil, but they need to define what evil is. But their definition of evil is purely subjective. Now, just because you might think logically, you might have your own logical, rational basis as to why he might do something bad, but on the same token, he has his own logical, rational explanation as to why he does what he does. People who used to exterminate other races, people who used to commit genocide, they used to have perfectly logical, rational reasons for it. I mean, it's really arrogant for someone to say, I have my own logic and rationale, therefore I'm right. Well, that person has his own rationale and logic. So by that same methodology, he's right as well. And by that same methodology, nobody's right. Nobody's wrong. Don't think that just because you have your own philosophy or your own rationale or your own logic, someone else doesn't. But now, with God in the picture, with a metaphysical purpose behind it, good and bad makes perfect sense. Because it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It doesn't matter what you think, what I think. God is the ultimate judge. God is the arbitrator. He says what goes and what doesn't go. It's not up to you or me. It's not up to our culture or our beliefs of how life should be. Now the atheist will come up with a response. An atheist will say, okay, which God? That question is irrelevant because we're not debating which God. For instance, when a Christian and a Muslim debates, they're trying to establish who God is. But when it comes to the core principle of an objective definition for good and bad, we both agree. Both Christians, Muslims, and Jews all agree that it is only with God and that it is only with a metaphysical purpose behind life that you can reach a logical, rational conclusion of what good and bad is. When theists debate each other, when Christians and Muslims debate each other, we're just trying to identify who the true purpose is. What's the true purpose? But we don't debate the core principles. We all agree on the core principles. And I'm sure any Christian or a Jew who watches this, even though I'm not a Christian or a Jew, they would agree with everything that I'm saying. So it's irrelevant which God. The core principle remains that there is an objective basis and a metaphysical basis for good and bad. And when you remove that, and when you come from a purely materialistic worldview, you have big problems. And let me repeat, from a materialistic worldview, we're alive, we're here as a result of evolution. Evolution is simply about survival. If it's only about my survival, then I really shouldn't care about you. Because if I help you in using resources, that diminishes my chances of survival. So from a materialistic worldview, you shouldn't care about anybody. But I know most atheists don't. And as I said, they're good, moral people. But when it comes to explaining the reasons behind it, they can't give you a good reason. Now, I can give a good reason for why they do good, but they can't give a proper, rational, intellectual reason for why they do good. It's basically meaningless. They say, as I said, it's based on sympathy. I have sympathy, so that's why I help you. But again, evolution doesn't have sympathy. Evolution doesn't have empathy. You either go with it or you don't. You can't have your cake and eat it. I'm sorry.
1 minute.
I know they'd like to, but I'm not going to allow for that. Either you remain consistent with your materialistic worldview or you don't. There's no middle ground. That's the way it is. That's the conclusion you have to reach with. And that's why, as we say, all theists say, from a purely materialistic worldview, you have a lot of problems. And as atheists themselves admit, some of them admit there is no good, there is no bad. Evil doesn't exist, and at least they're consistent, they're honest. Because if what's good is good for me, and what's bad is only bad what you do. Like if everything's relative, if everything's subjective, then it's true. Good doesn't exist. I have my view, you have yours. What you might think is good, I might think is bad, based on my own research. But if we believe in that, then good doesn't exist. So let me wrap it up. Evil exists because of free will, and God has told you not to do evil. So you have no excuse for doing it anyway. So that's my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Sami. I will now pass it on to Farhan Qureshi for 20 minutes. Just press the start when you start. When you want to go. I'll count it from you when you're ready. 2, 1, 2, 3.
I'm going to go by yours. Whatever.
That's all right.
Anyway, peace be with you. Thank you for coming. And thank you, Sami Zaatari, for participating in this debate. Thank you to Brother Abdullah Andalusi and the Muslim Debate Initiative for all of their hospitality and kindness throughout my stay here. It's very well appreciated, again, from within the depths of me. I think Sami raised some important questions. He raised some very important questions, but none of them had to do with the problem of evil. The problem of evil is a classical debate amongst philosophers, and it has been for at least the past 2,500 years. And even though the questions that Sami Zaatari raised are very important questions that are worthy of discussion, none of those questions, with the exception of one theodicy, and I'll get to the theodicy that he did mention. With the exception of the one theodicy, and for those who don't know what a theodicy is, again, in the historical philosophical discussion about the problem of evil and how the philosophers have always defined and discussed the problem of evil, theodicy is a response, a theological response to the problem of evil, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Well, let me go ahead and define what the problem of evil is, so you guys know what we are supposed to be discussing versus the questions that Brother Sami has raised. The Greek philosopher, nearly 2,000 years ago, Epicurus, raised the problem of evil quite eloquently, and other philosophers such as Mackey and Hume and others mirror his definition or his objection against the existence of evil. Epicurus says, "Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able or willing? Then why call him God?" This is the problem of evil in a nutshell. So the question that we're asking here is, why does evil exist? Why is God allowing the existence of evil? That's the question. Now, the only theodicy that Brother Sami gave was the theodicy of free will. There's many different types of theodicies, but apparently we're not going to deal with them today, but with the exception of the theodicy of free will. And I'll be very gladly to talk about this discussion, primarily because I am a determinist. And I think determinism really spoils that theodicy. But we'll get into that in just a moment. Let me also state that I'm coming from a position of agnosticism and not atheism. And agnosticism is the position of not knowing what the ultimate reality is. And from that premise, being open to the possibilities, which include the possibility of a metaphysical, transcendental reality. But again, that has nothing to do with the problem of evil. But I think that perhaps one of the more important questions that Brother Sami has raised that relate somewhat to the problem of evil is his question about what is evil. And he says that generally to agnostics and atheists and humanists that the definition of evil is relative. Now, philosophically, there are two types of evil identified. That is natural evil and moral evil. Natural evil, of course, has to do with God allowing, again, the key point, God allowing, sustaining, maintaining, creating all of the natural disasters that bring about suffering. And this comes to the definition of evil that I would like to give. It's a combination of what classical philosophers have said about the problem, as well as what psychologists say about the definition of evil. And why is psychology important here? Because when we're talking about moral evil, what we're talking about is human behavior, are we not? And if we're talking about human behavior, we have to go to the behavioral sciences, namely psychology, sociology, and neuroscience. This is a very, very key point. If we're defining human behavior, which we can, objectively, not just subjectively, but objectively define behavior, then we have a definition on our hands. So what is evil as a human behavior? It is the psychological disturbance that brings about suffering, the unnecessary suffering on humankind. Now, generally the philosophers will say that it's the intentional and unnecessary cause of suffering on sentient beings, living creatures. But I think that the intention there that philosophy is, or philosophers are talking about, negates the fact that we're talking about human behavior, and that's why I think the psychological disturbance factor plays in heavily into this question. What do we mean by psychological disturbance? And this is where we can get into a little bit of the theodicy that Sami did raise, which was a free will theodicy. Now, the basic argument is this, right? That we are born and raised in predetermined circumstances, in a social construct with social norms, with not having any control over who our parents would be, what they would teach us, what their parenting styles would be, what genes that we would inherit, what brain chemistry that we are enduring in every moment of our lives, what psychological conditioning that we go through. And of course, we can again talk about Skinner and Pavlov and their experimentation with human conditioning, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and how this molds the human being over time, especially when you think about the child and adolescent who has absolutely no idea what's going on in the world, and yet is having all of these intense experiences that are guiding and molding who they are and who they will become, and the choices that they make and the behaviors that they exhibit and the perception of reality that they have. So when we look at a criminal act, whether it's murder, rape, or anything else that you can think of, it's not just an isolated situation of that person killing that person or raping that person. Rather, there's a plethora of predetermined circumstances and causal factors that guided that person to this unfortunate behavior. And we're talking about brain chemistry here. We're talking about environmental causal factors here. And anytime we talk about causality, we're talking about determinism. And so at the point of killing, at the point of raping, at the point of stealing, at the point of anything that we can think is evil, there is a psychological disturbance that is going on there. And this is something we can objectively and scientifically and empirically demonstrate. In a matter of fact, we were talking about human conditioning. According to a study held at I think it's the University of Dallas, the study by Park and Wang, it says that culture, social construct, experiences rewire the brain. And empirically we can detect that even if there's the macro structure is the same, meaning it's the same frontal lobes and hemispheres of the brain that each and every one of us have, but on a micro scale, the very physiology, the physical organ itself, and the chemistry itself that's going on there, is changed, is altered by these and through these experiences. And as our brain is wired in a certain way, this impacts what? The behaviors that we exhibit, the choices that we make, and the perception of reality that we have. And again, we have to rewire our brain again, meaning go through an additional amount of consistent conditioning in order to undo that. And this is something that has empirical evidence behind it. In this study, it's the quote that I have is, "There's clear evidence that sustained experiences may affect both brain structure and function." So not only is it the physiology of the brain being impacted, but also the function, meaning the behavior that it's causing. So now, for free will, since that's the only theodicy that he gave, I want to look at it from, again, a theological perspective, particularly the Quran. There are some verses that I have, for example, chapter 74, verse 56, that none keep it in remembrance except Allah wills, meaning talking about the revelation. And that's a very important verse, because chapter 81, verse 27 says, "Verily this is no less than a message to the world, that whosoever wills to go straight," but verse 29 says, "but you shall not will except as Allah wills." So in reality, there's no will of the human being, it's only what Allah wills. This is why Muslims say, "Insha'Allah, whatever Allah wills will happen." So the will, even according to the Quran, is an illusion. Because nothing will happen in this world. No leaf will turn except by the permission of Allah. And so the will is completely an illusion according to Islamic theology. Chapter 43, verse 36 through 37. "If anyone withdraws himself from the remembrance of Allah, the most gracious, we will appoint for him an evil one to be intimate companion to him. And such will really hinder this person from the path, but they think that they are rightly guided." And so, if a person removes himself from the remembrance of Allah, remember in chapter 74, verse 56, says that no one keeps the revelation in remembrance except as Allah wills. And so in this verse it says that whoever Allah wills to not remember him, that Allah sends you an evil one, a metaphysical shaitan, if you will. And you know what's funny about the predetermined circumstances and the lack of free will that's very apparent, both scientifically and theologically, when we're talking about the omniscience or the all-knowingness of the divine, is that additionally to this, that there's this metaphysical being that we can call shaitan in Arabic, that furthers one's determinism, that further one's doing evil, that furthers one's psychological disturbance that is bringing about unnecessary suffering to sentient beings. That Allah is not only allowing all of these predetermined circumstances, all of the evil that we're seeing in this world, but additionally is allowing the existence of this metaphysical being that is only contributing to all of this, to this whole scenario. And that's where the problem of evil comes in. That Allah is allowing, maintaining, sustaining, and is the creator of all of the evil as we know it, and shaitan itself that is further whispering into the ears of human beings and influencing them in this way. This is something that God is allowing. Now, the next thing that comes to mind is, why would Allah allow this? Why would Allah allow all of the evil and suffering that we have? Why couldn't God just create heaven? Obviously, that's the final destination of where everyone goes. Apparently, there's no free choice to disobey or dishonor God there. Everyone's living without any suffering, any evil. But for some reason, instead of God just creating heaven, God creates a world full of suffering, full of evil, the capacity to disobey Him. What's the purpose behind this? And this is the classical philosophical discussion that we're supposed to be having today. So we have a scenario here where Allah guides whoever He wants, misguides whoever He wants, sends astray whoever He wants, gives knowledge to whoever He wants. It creates us as these impatient, weak creatures, completely susceptible to psychological disturbance. That isn't our fault to begin with, because of the determinism that I'm arguing today. And then on top of all of this suffering, there's going to be more suffering. Not just in hell, but even in your grave. Adhab al-qabr. It's suffering after suffering after suffering. Is this not evil? Is this not wicked? Can't you define the divine if you look at God in this way as evil, by definition? Now, of course, this has to involve a God who is, as the Abrahamic traditions define God. What is God is altogether a different ontological question. And a matter of fact, before you can even talk about does God exist, you have to talk about what God is, which is a separate question altogether. And according to the Abrahamic traditions, God is an external, judgmental personality, which, if this is true, if the problem of evil is an actual issue, not only is He an external, judgmental personality, but He's also a tyrannical dictator. And this is a type of a definition of God that brings about several problems. But of course, there's other ways of looking at God. There's the possibility of deism. There's the possibility of pantheism. There's the philosophical notion of the Tao, which is just a cosmic force. And so there are other definitions where the problem of evil does not necessarily come into play, but for the Abrahamic traditions it does. Because God is, again, choosing to allow all of this to happen. Now, most of the entire the subject of morality, what is the source of morality, what is, why do we do good? He brought up social Darwinism, the argument for social Darwinism. Why don't we just follow social Darwinism? Why don't we have more of a sense of morality? Is completely irrelevant to the topic at hand. It has nothing to do with the problem of evil. It has nothing to do with the questions of Epicurus and Hume and all of these classical philosophers that have ever brought up this topic. Now, one thing, in order to be intellectually honest, William Lane Craig has had some fascinating debates about this particular topic. And one thing that we can clarify, I think, for the side of atheists and agnostics, is that this is not a logical problem for there to be an evil God. For there to be the existence of evil and for there to be God. This is not a logical problem. Rather, it's an evidential problem, or what William Lane Craig calls the probabilistic problem. And so, but here's the thing about logic. I don't know if Sami wants to discuss logic today, but logically, a lot of things are possible. And that's why the probabilistic version of the problem of evil is more worthy of a discussion, and I was expecting to be discussing that today. but I'm not sure if Sami is familiar with the Odyssey and the arguments surrounding the problem of evil, but we'll see in the rebuttal.
1 minute.
Okay, so to sum up the arguments, the question that Sami is asking, what is evil? Again, the question of what is evil is a tangent from the problem of evil as is defined by Epicurus. I defined evil for Sami because he thinks that it's necessary to define what evil is, and I defined it as the psychological disturbance that brings about the unnecessary suffering upon sentient beings. So, for example, when a deer gets hit, and is randomly suffering for no reason at all, for hours at a time, which would be a problem of natural evil, then why is that happening? What's the greater purpose in that? And then the problem of evil as defined by Epicurus, I would like Sami to discuss that if possible. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. Now, that's an amazing presentation filled with contradictions and simply filled with agreeing with what I'm saying, that they don't have a definition. First of all, he brings up Epicurus. And if you watched my video, I brought him up as well, because think of it. Atheists, agnostics bring up the Epicurus statement. Why is there evil? But I'm asking you to define what evil is before you want to even use the term. So when he says what I'm saying is irrelevant, it's not irrelevant. It's perfectly relevant to the discussion. Because I'm asking their position to tell us what evil is before they want to keep asking us, why is there evil? So what is evil? I'm going to the core of the argument. You see, I don't allow the atheists and agnostics to simply use terms which they haven't identified. So before you want to use Epicurus' definition, what is it? And Epicurus doesn't even give a definition of evil. He just says, why does evil exist? I'm asking you, what is evil? Before you want to just use the word evil. Epicurus does not give a definition of evil. He just says, why does evil exist? If this exists, God is that. I'm asking you, what is evil in the first place? And he came up with a response, which is basically saying what I'm saying. It's all relative. It's how culture has made you. It's how culture has molded you. You're basically how your parents made you, according to your genetics, and so forth and so forth. But if I'm living, or if the way I am is because of my society, then you can't blame me for something bad. For instance, he contradicts himself again. He says, evil is any unnecessary harming. What if I come from a society that says unnecessary harm is a good thing? Then what? Well, based on your first definition, then that's not evil, because that's my culture. That's how I was molded into a person. My society taught me to look down on that person, to hurt that person, to kill that person. And in fact, we do know a society like that. Not too long ago, the Germans, the Nazis, they completely had this program of a superior race. So if you were a child who grew up in Nazi Germany, you would think you are superior, you would think you are better, you would think it's a good thing to get rid of other people based on this race issue. So based on that sociology study, then the Nazis were actually not wrong. They were good, because that's how they were molded into. And what did I say? I said that's completely subjective. We might think it's wrong based on how we were grown up, but they were raised in another way. So therefore evil doesn't exist. So therefore you just back what I am saying. And that is not a definition of evil. In that worldview, evil does not exist. And he didn't get the point. He talks about suffering. But my point is precisely, without an objective definition of evil, suffering is excusable. For instance, he says social Darwinism has nothing to do with the debate. But yes, it does. Because according to social Darwinism, you must harm people. According to the materialistic worldview of social Darwinism, you must hurt others to ensure your own survival, which goes against his own definition. So the materialistic worldview even contradicts his own view, which still doesn't give an answer. So the materialistic evolutionary worldview completely hurts his position. Because if you are consistent and if you believe in an evolutionary, biological or materialistic worldview, then you must cause suffering. You mustn't help the poor. You must ensure your survival. And it's amazing. I wrote this down as well. Farhan keeps saying, why does God allow this? Why so much evil? Why? And I'm writing here, why is it evil? There is no definition. Why is it wrong? Based on what? You haven't given any logical explanation as to why it's evil. You just said sociology, and that contradicts it anyway. And then I think it's funny. You say God is a dictator. And before he said God is a dictator, he was actually saying, why doesn't God do this? What? You're angry because God didn't do something. You're angry because God gave you free will. And you're calling him a dictator just because God didn't control you like a robot? You're asking God to get involved, and then you're calling him a dictator. Which one is it? Do you want God to get involved? Yes or no? You can't have it both ways. And this is on record. And I even made a video about this. I said atheists are inconsistent because they call God a dictator. But when God gives them free will, they say, why doesn't God come and do this? What is it? I mean, it's so much philosophical contradictions. And I'm glad you brought this up because atheists always say, I strawman them. You heard it right from him. God is a dictator. So I'm not strawmanning anybody. That's what you say. But how can he be a dictator if he gave you free will? It doesn't work both ways. And that's why there is evil. Because you have a free will. And secondly, he says, why does God allow it? Why? But what he doesn't tell you is God doesn't make you do evil. God has told you what evil is. He brings up Satan. God has told you Satan is an open enemy to you. Shun his ways. Furthermore, the Quran says Satan has no control over you. Satan only has control over those who what? Over those who listen to him. So that contradicts what you're saying. You have an intention, you have a bad thought, and the Quran even calls Satan a bad advisor. He's like a bad advisor who just pushes you, but he doesn't make you do it. And what does God say? Turn to him. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge with God. I shun the ways of Satan. And now when you do something bad, as we all do, we're responsible. Not Satan, we get the sin. If Satan was responsible for our sins, then we wouldn't get punished for it. But Satan doesn't make us sin. We ourselves sin because we disobey God based on free will. And that's why there is evil. Again, God doesn't make you do something bad. Stop blaming God and blame the human. As I just made a video a few weeks ago. Stop blaming God. When someone puts a gun to somebody else's head, blame that person. But according to him, you were genetically maybe made that way, so we shouldn't blame him at all. If you're made that way based on your society, then why should we send someone to jail? If you were molded into a way, if you grew up with parents who taught you to be bad, why should we blame that kid if he eventually grows up and is bad? Isn't that unfair? So in his own worldview, you even see oppression happening right now. Because we punish people. But why should we punish them if they were molded into that way? As he said, everything is predetermined. There is no free will according to his worldview. So if there's no free will according to his worldview, how can anybody be guilty of anything they do? You see all these problems? And that's the point I was getting to. They have no proper definition of evil. Their definition of evil is precisely the very things they're complaining about. That's the point I'm trying to make. And as for God misguiding and guiding, according to the Quran, the Hadiths, scholarly interpretation, God guides those who are already guided, so He helps you more. As for who He misguides those who are already misguided, so He hardens their hearts. He doesn't misguide them if they want the truth. But if they're opposing God, then God just gives it to them. He misguides them, but not from an original standpoint. For instance, God won't just come to you and misguide you for the sake of misguiding you. And as for everything is with the will of Allah,
1 minute.
what that means is everything is in His power, because everything happens by the will of God. But it doesn't mean He controls you like a robot. All it means, when you do something bad or something good, you only did it because He allowed you to do it. That's what it means, because He's in control of everything. But if you did something that was outside His will, then He's not all-powerful, then He cannot be God. Basic philosophy, basic theology. So it doesn't mean you're controlled like a robot. It means He's in control of everything, and you're acting, basically, you're acting on His field. You're only functioning because He allows you to function. But He doesn't make you function like a robot. He just gives you that will. He allows you to do it. So in essence, He's the one who's fully in charge. You're not like a robot. In fact, the Quran even says in Surah 7, verse 28, it talks about free will. So you need to look at this in context.
Thank you for that, Sami. I will now give 10 minutes to Farhan to make his first rebuttal.
Yeah, sure. Thank you again, Sami, for that response. Sami keeps asking, what is evil, what is evil? Epicurus does not define what evil is, but he never gives us his definition of what evil is. I'll give you guys an example. There was a Fräulein, there was this female in Austria by the name of Fräulein Freisel. She was a child in Austria, and she was locked in her basement by her biological father. And for 20 years, she was continuously raped, molested, sodomized, and tortured. For 20 years. Imagine the agony. Imagine the screams. Imagine the mental trauma and feelings and emotions she must have gone through for all of those years, being locked up in that basement. Imagine how much she must have prayed to God to save her from that. But heaven watches without any intervention. This is the problem of evil that Sami has completely ignored in both his rebuttal and his opening statement. Completely ignored. Only one theodicy was given, and it was the theodicy of free will. And he had no response in terms of the determinism that I laid out before you in an empirical, rational way. He simply says that there's free will. We're not robots. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But let me state one more time the problem of evil, which is what this debate is about. Let me state it one more time from Epicurus. Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then He is not omnipotent. Is He able but not willing? Then He is malevolent. Is He both able and willing? Then where does evil come from? Is He neither able nor willing? Then why call Him God? This is the problem of evil. All of that, tangents. And this is a question that Sami has to, either he's going to choose to continue to ignore it, or he's going to deal with it. So, coming back to the definition of evil, okay, what do you define as evil? What Fräulein Freisel went through, do you define that as evil because the Quran says it's evil? Because Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says it's evil? Is that why you define it as evil? Or is there another reason you define it as evil? What is your definition of evil? Is it because Allah says it's evil, or are there other reasons? I think that's a relevant question, because he's asking me what's evil. Why don't you answer the question, what is evil? Now, coming back, I want to come back to the free will debate, because in terms of being robots. Again, going back to these verses of the Quran, it would imply that we are robots, by definition. No misfortune can happen on earth. This is a verse of the Quran, chapter 57, verse 22. No misfortune can happen on earth or in your souls, but it is recorded in the taqdeer, the decree, before we bring it into existence. No calamity can happen. No evil can happen on this planet. Or in your souls, but it is recorded before Allah brings it into existence. That is truly easy for Allah. So all of the evil that you see today, this is something that Allah is doing. This is something that Allah is bringing into existence per His own claim. That's a robot. Chapter 64, verse 11. No kind of calamity can occur except by the leave of Allah. And if anyone believes in Allah, Allah guides his heart, for Allah knows all things. So all suffering that happens by the permission, by the maintenance, by the sustenance, by the creation, by the will of Allah. Not your will, not your doing, but by the will of Allah. And you're simply the robot watching it happen, experiencing it, like Fräulein Freisel did for 20 years, locked in that basement. Is Allah able to intervene, but He doesn't? That's the question of evil. All of what he's talking about are completely tangents unrelated to the topic at hand. And the only theodicy he gives is a free will theodicy trumped by the argument from determinism. Theological determinism, as I've quoted from the Quran, and scientific, empirical, rational determinism, which is, again, a consensus amongst the scientists and philosophers of today. So again, let's talk about the definition of evil, because he gives the example of the Nazis, that it's all relative, and that's an important question, because he left out the beginning of my definition for evil that he wanted. I said psychological disturbance that brings about the unnecessary suffering of sentient beings. So what the Nazis were doing in Nazi Germany was evil. This is something that I think Sami and I can agree on. But why were they doing it? Because of a psychological disturbance. Because of the same thing that religion does. Indoctrination and brainwashing. When a person is brainwashed, when a person is indoctrinated in such a way, their behavior reflects that. Right? When we're talking about evil, again, you want a definition of evil. Moral evil. We are talking about a human behavior here. This isn't a subjective, relative definition. This is an objective way of looking at human behavior, the social sciences. You didn't deal with the fact that this is what was going on in Nazi Germany was in fact a psychological disturbance, or in any other situation that you can think of. Again, it's not an isolated situation of murder, rape, molestation. There are a plethora of predetermined circumstances from which human beings have no control over. A plethora, several circumstances that bring about the events that we're seeing today. Again, causality, that's what determinism is. So once you look at evil as a psychological disturbance, as a human behavior, then you can see why something is evil, why the unnecessary suffering of sentient beings is evil. Okay, now this question about that I'm angry at God because God is not doing that, I should do something about it. Again, that's a free will argument which he has to deal with. But we're talking about a being that is omnipotent. We're talking about the omnipotence and omnibenevolence of the divine. If God is all powerful, then he can do whatever he wants, unless he is not omnipotent. So how can we not ask God this question? That if you're able to relieve us of all this suffering, then why don't you? This is a being that's supposed to be able to do this. I can't do it myself. We can't even do it collectively because we're fragile, fallible human beings. We're fallible. We're weak. We have limitations, but God doesn't have any limitations. That's why we're angry at God, at this hypothetical God that Abrahamic tradition posits. This external judgmental personality that is allowing all of the evil and suffering that's going on in the world that we're experiencing. Why not just create heaven? He didn't answer that question. Why not just create a situation where none of this is possible? So I think my time is up. It's 10 minutes.
Oh, you still got 20 seconds.
Okay, you can have it.
All right, thanks. I'll take it. Thank you. Okay, I'll now give it to Sami for second rebuttals, 6 minutes each.
All right. Why didn't God just create heaven? Because then it would be meaningless. The fact that you achieve heaven, that's why there's a purpose to it. That's why we keep saying there's a purpose. So that's the answer to that question, because then it's all meaningless. Now he brings up the Austrian rape victim, which is very good because he completely debunks his own case. He says, imagine her rapes. Imagine it all. But do you know, her father, based on his sociology, he was preconditioned and predetermined to act like that. According to him, his mother was abusive. So therefore, he was molded into who he was. So therefore, by his logic, Joseph Fritzl is a victim himself and should not be punished. We should have sympathy on him based on his own criteria, because he was molded into that character based on his what? Life experiences, based on how he grew up, based on his social conditions. He was made into that way. And I agree, there's many social sciences that talk about psychopaths, rapists, and murderers. But if we want to completely agree with that they're molded into this way, then they themselves are victims. And instead of sending them to jail, we should send them to institutions to help them. So therefore, we should feel sorry for Joseph Fritzl based on his definition. You can't have your cake and eat it. I'm sorry. And then he says, I never gave a definition of evil. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, but I agree with him. Unnecessary harming, murder, and so forth and so forth. I agree that those are all evil. But unlike him, it's not simply based on my subjective definition. I base my reasoning on what God says. Why? God is perfect in knowledge. He's perfect in wisdom. He is good himself. It's not based on my simple subjective opinion, which doesn't stand. If I have a subjective opinion, then there is no evil. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, without the metaphysical reasoning behind it, the objective metaphysical reasoning behind it, evil does not exist. And atheists themselves had admitted that. That's the point I'm trying to get to. I said atheists have morals, they're good people. But the point I'm trying to get at is that without the metaphysical reasoning behind it, it makes absolutely no sense. And the Darwinist, the social Darwinist, the materialistic Darwinist, which he didn't really respond to, they make sense, and you should follow their worldview. And he brings up the Nazis, and again he contradicts himself. He says the Nazis were brainwashed, indoctrinated, and so forth and so forth. Based on who? Based on your opinion. But for them, they were doing something right. Hitler thought he was doing something right when he wrote Mein Kampf. He didn't think he was brainwashed. He didn't think he was indoctrinated. What's to say that you're not brainwashed and indoctrinated by all these philosophical teachings that you're studying? You see how arrogant it is from a subjective worldview? Oh, they're wrong. Why? Just because you think they're wrong? And again, they were predetermined to act like that. Sociology. So even if they were brainwashed, then they're still not evil because they're preconditioned to be that way based on their society. And then he brought up a point, he said, I ignored his definition. No, I didn't. I said you contradicted yourself. You call it a psychological disturbance, and then you go on to try to explain it by saying, oh, they were made into that way. Well, if you were made into that way, then your society caused the psychological disturbance, so therefore you're not wrong at all. Society should get the blame. But society was molded into that way. So your own definition contradicts itself. That's my point. And he brings up the other point. Can God prevent evil? It's pretty clear that Farhan wants God to get involved. But he calls God a dictator. You can't have it both ways. You can't say God's a dictator and then say, I want him to get involved and do everything. You can't have it like that. It's a contradiction. You can't have your cake and eat it. But can God prevent evil? Yes, he can. But does it make him evil that he doesn't? No, because he tells you not to do evil. And when you or I do evil, it's because of our free will, and we are responsible. Don't try to blame God. God has told you not to do that evil. But he's kind enough to not control you like a robot, so it has a meaning to it. If you were controlled like a robot, there would be no purpose. There would be absolutely no meaning at all in doing good or having paradise. Those terms would make no sense at all. As theists always say, there's a greater good, there's a purpose. That's why these things exist. So that doesn't make God evil at all. And he says everything is recorded beforehand. True, God has recorded everything beforehand. But it doesn't mean you're controlled like a robot. All it means is that God knows everything, right? God is all-knowing. So if God is all-knowing, that means he knows what's going to happen before it happens. If God doesn't know what's going to happen before it happens, then he's ignorant, he's not all-knowing, and he can't be God. Again, basic theology, basic philosophy. God knows what's going to happen because he's perfect in knowledge. But that's a different thing than saying God controls you like a robot.
Thank you for that. His second rebuttal.
Okay, so to the first issue about the necessity to achieve heaven, that life would be meaningless. That's the point. Is that did God have to create a system, a universe, a world where all of this suffering and evil would happen? Is all of that suffering and evil and disobedience to God worth not simply just creating heaven? Did you call that meaningful for Fräulein Freisel to go through 20 years of torture and rape and misery? That was worth it? That was meaningful? It's not a response to the issue of why God, in his omnipotence, in his omnibenevolence, the audacity to claim that God is all-powerful, the audacity to claim that God is love, all-loving, the epitome of love, and yet is creating a system where all of this is going on. All of the evil that you can fathom. Now, as far as him being a product of his circumstances, his genetics, his social construct, and so on and so forth, that we should have sympathy towards this man who is doing all of these evil things, and that's the big issue here. He and I agree that it's evil, that it's the unnecessary suffering of sentient beings, but that's what we're saying. When it comes to accountability, whether it's Adolf Hitler, whether it's Fräulein's father, that they are not accountable. That instead of punishment, that there should be consequences. And what do we mean by this? That we're taking this person away from society in order to protect society from them because they're a danger to society. and to rehabilitate them because they're a product of their circumstances. It's like quarantining a virus. The man is completely a product of his genetics and his experiences and his trauma. The reason he was behaving that way, the reason evil is manifesting itself is because of a psychological disturbance. And it's the most common study that is brought up when talking about determinism and free will is that of Joshua Green and Jonathan Cohen. The Department of Psychology study for the study of brain, mind, and behavior, Princeton University, Princeton, New Jersey. And in this document it says, we argue that neuroscience will probably have a transformative effect on the law, despite the fact that existing legal doctrine can, in principle, accommodate whatever neuroscience will tell us. We foresee and recommend a shift away from punishment aimed at retribution in favor of a more progressive consequentialist approach to the criminal law. And so what this retribution is the idea that the person deserves to be punished. The idea of consequence is that because they are a product of all of these circumstances and evil is manifesting through their very being and their existence, that they need instead rehabilitation. And that could mean a lifetime worth of isolation, if necessary, depending on how bad the psychological disturbance is. And that's what we're talking about. When we talk about Nazi Germany, we're talking about indoctrination. We're talking about brainwashing. We're talking about psychological disturbance. If you were born in the 1930s as Adolf Hitler, with his brain chemistry, his genetics, his experiences, his parents, and everything that he went through, you would, by way of determinism, you would have done everything that he did. This is determinism. This is causality. And it's not your fault. And this is what neuroscience is going to understand. This is what the entire study that Green and Cohen have done says. That there's going to be a transformative effect because there's this idea that there needs to be retribution. This primitive idea that there needs to be retribution. That these criminals, these unfortunate products of their circumstances, that they deserve that they deserve to be punished. And that's and what we know from science empirically, that this is not the case. That they're an unfortunate product of their circumstances. They had little control over what they were doing or thinking. And in the beginning, I talked about how the social construct changes the very physiology, the physical organ itself. It changes the physiology and the chemistry of the brain. And you begin to, as you are conditioned, begin to react to that social conditioning and behave in a habitual way. And so I agree that they should not be punished. Rather, there should be the consequence of taking this person away from society and rehabilitating them and treating them. So now coming back to how many minutes? 6 minutes, right? So coming back to the issue of the problem of evil. Again, but I'm going to ask the bigger question is this. Is God able, in his omnipotence, is he able to end all suffering? And why doesn't he do it? Just that's a very simple question. Why doesn't God do it?
Okay. Thank you for that. All right. We're now on to the question and answer session, whereby you, the audience, can get involved and now begin heckling the speakers. So we're going to try and alternate it, so one question to each person. I take it that there might be a disproportionate number of people of certain positions in this room, so try to frame a question to even a person of your own side to elicit more answers. So question for Sami. Right, is there any atheists in this room? I don't know. All right.
Okay. Right. You said... just a quick question. If evil comes from free will, is there free will in heaven? And if there is not free, if there is free will in heaven, surely there must be evil in heaven.
In heaven it's different. In heaven there is no bad. Basically, there is no evil because it's perfect, basically. But you're not controlled like a robot. It's because you've earned your way there now. So there, in evil, in paradise, there is no evil. It's completely different than this materialistic worldview that we live in. It's a different realm, you could say.
But there is free will.
There is free will, yeah. But in paradise, there is no imperfection. There's nothing bad in paradise. Everything is good and pure. But now I know someone might ask, why couldn't it be that way on this planet? Because if it was this way on this planet, then it would be completely meaningless to have earned it to go there. That only has a good basis. The reason why paradise is so perfect, the reason why you enjoy it, is precisely based on your human experiences. And now you can contrast it and say, look how perfect this place is. No suffering, none of these things. So it makes you even appreciate it more, which is the point I'm trying to get to. That's the whole purpose and meaning for it. That's why it's different.
Sure. Farhan, would you like to make a quick comment?
You know, I think that's a big an important question that he asks, is because apparently you're not robots, but you at the same time simultaneously you cannot choose evil. You have choice, yet you don't have choice. You're a robot, but you're not a robot. And the fact that you can't choose evil, that's in contradiction with how we define free will in that sense, as Sami is trying to define it.
Okay, question for Farhan. Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention that I think you mentioned that Allah misguides and that free will, according to the Quran, you quoted some verses that everything comes from Allah, hence we got no free will. But there's a surah in the Quran, ayah in the Quran, where Allah Azza wa Jal says the good that comes to you is from Allah, but the harm that comes to you is you wronging yourself. And also about Allah misguided in Surah 2 verse 26 and 27, Allah mentions He only misguides those who do wrong and who break the covenant with Him. But the interesting thing is Surah 4 115, Allah shows how He misguides them, and the thing is, it says there, He misguides them by allowing them to carry on in their way. Notice it doesn't say He makes them do wrong, it says He allows them to do wrong, carry on doing it, which shows that we've got the free will to do wrong, and it's not Allah who makes us do wrong. So could you elaborate on that?
Well, it's not just Allah allowing it, but He's fueling it, right? If for the Quran talks about the verses that I quoted, that if for a moment that you refuse to remember God, or fail to remember God, that God sends you an evil one. This is something that Allah is doing. So He's fueling it in a sense. It says that that Allah seals the hearts of people. So again, once the heart is sealed, there's no alternative. You're basically dead. There's no free will anymore. Once your heart is sealed, that's it. So again, it's very ambiguous, and it depends on what school of thought you want to talk about as well. And I don't know what school of thought Sami comes from. But for example, in the Ashari school of thought, that when they had to deal with the issue of qadr and jabr, what they said was that Allah is the causer or the creator of every action that we know, and that the human being, as you said, the verse that you're quoting, and they probably would use that in support of it, is that evil comes from yourself. But what does that mean? It comes through your intention. According to the Ashari school of thought, that you have the intention and then Allah creates the action. And that is where ikhtiyar or free will comes in. But then when you think about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, ikhtilaf ummati rahmatul linnas, that your deeds or actions are judged by your intentions, now you have a contradiction on your hands. Because you're on one hand, in the Ashari school of thought, you're saying that Allah creates your intention, and then it's saying your actions are judged based on your intentions. That's a contradiction there. And I think that free will and determinism, as it's explained in the Quran, is kind of contradictory in that sense too. It's saying that Allah wills everything, and yet it really doesn't define for us what our will is. It says that it talks about our will, and then it talks about how Allah's will actually go on. So I think that's a contradictory message in the Quran that Muslims have to deal with.
Can I just have a clarification?
No, just a second. We have to keep it one question. Sami, would you like to make a comment?
All right. And now in Islam, we do have free will. That's a given. When it says that everything happens by Allah's will, so when you do something bad or good and it happens by Allah's will, all it means is he allows it because he willed it. He allowed it. He didn't make you do it because he's all-powerful. He's in control of everything. That's what it simply means. He's in control of everything. Nothing happens outside his control. Because if something happened outside his control, then he's not all-powerful, and he's imperfect, and he can't be God. So when it says you only do things by the will of God, it simply means it's because he simply allowed you to do so. But it doesn't mean he makes you do it. There's a difference between allowing you to do something and making you do it. Now, Farhan says that there's a school of thought that says God created everything. That's true. He created everything, but he doesn't force you to act on that creation. Now, if God didn't create anything, and something's created without God, then that means there's another creator, and that means God is not unique, and that means God is not the only originator, and therefore, again, he cannot be God. This is simple theology and simple philosophy. So there's no problems and there's no contradictions on these views. And back to another point. God knows everything before it happens, and he's already recorded it down. But that doesn't mean you're controlled like a robot. All it means is that he's all-knowing, and he doesn't have to wait for you to do something before he knows it. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have the opportunity to time travel. You can time travel to next week. So you time travel to next week, and you see everything that happens, so you know exactly what's going to happen, and you come back to this week. Does that mean that those people in the future are robots just because you know what they're going to do? The answer is no. Just because you know what someone is going to do does not make that person a robot.
Okay.
So that would be my response to that.
Okay, a question for Sami, and you can use this to allow Sami to clarify something or elaborate on something you'd also want to hear discussed in detail. No, Sami, a question. Well, wait once before. I'm going to try and alternate as much as possible. Now, I will get back to you as well. But okay, do you have a question for Sami you'd like that you didn't think was addressed in your presentation?
I'm sure. First of all, I think I mentioned the hadith in Arabic wrong. It's إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ وَبِالنِّيَّةِ. I think I was thinking of the ikhtilaf verse. The deeds are judged by intentions. But my question to Sami is this: does God know what you're going to do 5 minutes from now, and can he be wrong?
He knows what we're going to do, and no, he can't be wrong because he's perfect in knowledge.
So there's no other option for you to do what you're going to do in 5 minutes.
But I don't know what I'm going to do in 5 minutes. But no, God knows.
Okay,
there's a very interesting verse in the Quran because the pagans used this argument against the Prophet. They told him, we're like this based on God's will, based on his divine decree. But the Quran, God directly responds to this. God tells the pagans, but you don't know what's going to happen in the future. So there is a choice because I don't know what's going to happen. If you give me a choice between fire and water, I'm going to go into the water. You know, I have my choice. I don't know what's going to happen. God knows what's going to happen, but he doesn't make me do it. Just because he knows doesn't make me. I mean, I'll return the question to you. If you know what someone's going to do 10 minutes from now, and you don't make them do it, and you don't have anything to do with them, does that mean they don't have a free will? Does that mean, or a better question, does that mean they're a robot?
I mean, there's a chance that I might be able to predict, but if I predict something, I would be wrong. There's no way for me to know what somebody's going to do in 10 minutes. I can't play futurist.
If you went in a time machine and you saw it, what's going to happen next week, would that mean that those people acting next week are robots just because you know what they're going to do next week?
I mean, I don't see that scenario because if I use a time machine, am I coming back to the current moment? And then if I come back to the current then I can tell the person not to do what they're.
But if you didn't tell that person what's going to happen, would they be a robot? If you went to the future, you saw what's going to happen, and you came back in the past, and you knew what was going to happen a week from now, and you didn't tell them, would that mean that they are robots simply because you know what they are going to do?
I mean, I just don't think that that's possible for me to play that type of futurist
We know
role.
the answer, and it's no. Because
I can't play that futurist. It's logically not reasonable to posit that
actually,
hypothesis.
according to some scientists, time travel is possible if you get enough energy.
Within a multiverse.
All right, but okay, before we descend to Star Trek, let us. A question for Farhan, please.
Farhan, thanks for your presentation again. Look, you're obviously a well-read guy. Yeah, you're a smart guy. But you kept saying to Sami you only brought one theodicy, like, you know, that's somehow compulsory in the national curriculum, you've got to bring lots of theodicies. You know, the problem is the one theodicy you brought was maybe a bit difficult to respond to, because you're like, I think there was a philosopher called Wittgenstein who tried to define religion out of existence, because he said you can't define these terms. What is God? What is good? What is heaven? What is hell, right? You see, you define evil as a psychological disturbance, a disturbance from what norm? Which brings about unnecessary suffering. What's necessary suffering? And then again, what's suffering? You see, you haven't defined these terms. You see, so you're defining evil in a way which itself requires even more definition than the original question, which is what was evil? Because now you need to describe what is necessary suffering, what is, you know, the norm from which you've deviated, because he's right. In Nazi Germany, the norm was you hate Jews. Right? And you know what, that's not just Nazi Germany, that's even right now. We believe that the norm is, okay, armies can go overseas, cause massive civilian casualties, but that's a norm, right? It's okay if 600,000 Iraqis die, that's a norm. So who defines the deviation? According to what criteria do you set the norm?
Okay.
Okay,
That's that question.
Just to let you know, that question would be the same exact question for Sami. That it would have to be. No, he's going to respond to it. But how does he define evil? He wants me. If you want me to define, how do you define evil? You can't just go out and cop out and say because God says so. If you think something is evil, if you think what happened in Nazi Germany is evil, only because God says so in a book, then there's a problem with your definition of evil also. But when I'm talking about psychological disturbance, is that there are simply causal factors, human conditioning going on that's causing the behavior to begin with. That's all that I'm saying. When we're talking about human behavior, we have to talk in terms of what is it that's causing the behavior to be exhibited in the first place. So in Nazi Germany, all that I'm saying is that there are causal factors to why they are behaving the way they are behaving. That's it. And we can look at that as evil, and has Sami agreed to this, is because, and he even used the word unnecessary, is because it causes the unnecessary suffering upon sentient beings. Now, I wouldn't say that there should be any necessary cause, or that there should be some type of necessity to bring about suffering. But when we use, in philosophy, when we use the term unnecessary suffering, what we're talking about is that it's completely pointless. Like Fräulein Freisel just constantly being tortured and raped and molested and sodomized. I mean, on one hand, you can't say that that's necessary, but when we're saying that it's unnecessary, is what we're meaning is that it's pointless. There's no greater good that can come out of it. Now, and as far as the only theodicy that he gives, I'm a determinist, and I argue my determinism to the fullest, and that's why I think that the only theodicy that he did bring up is pretty much refuted, both from a theological perspective and from a scientific perspective.
Okay. Thanks for that.
All right.
Comment,
before I tell you why it's evil, his definition still has no evil, because he says it's unnecessary. According to who? Those Nazis thought it was very necessary to kill not just the Jews, but all the other people they killed. So again, that's very subjective, and that's very arrogant based on a subjective view that, based on your opinion, they're unnecessary. Well, to them, they were necessary. And that's why evil doesn't exist, according to some. Because if we have these subjective views, I say it's unnecessary, he says it's necessary, and there's no ultimate arbitrator, then there is no evil. So that's not a response. Now, the reason why we say it's evil as a Muslim or as a Christian is not simply because God says it, but God gives explanations for it. And secondly, God is perfect, perfect in knowledge, perfect in wisdom, perfect in justice. So now how is it objective? Because it's not my opinion. And so why does God say it's bad? Because number one, murder is wrong. Humans have a value to us. We have a purpose. We're not just some statistical number. We're not just a mere product of evolution that was made. We have a purpose to us. And as such, if you have a purpose to you, your life has a meaning. So therefore, there's a reason why you can't kill this person. Because he has a meaning, he has a purpose. There's a greater value to him. And again, God gives these rational explanations. It's wrong to murder. And if the perfect creator, in justice and truth, says it's wrong to murder, then obviously that's the truth. Not based on my subjective opinion, because in my subjective opinion, I can come to a case like Hitler. He had his own view as to why it's right to murder these people, based on his philosophy, which is all subjective. But as I said, there's a greater good to it. It's wrong to murder people. People have a value to them. But in a materialistic worldview, and I'll end it with this, in a materialistic worldview, people have no real value. It's just something we make up. Empathy, sympathy. Real evolution doesn't have these core principles to them. Only the metaphysical world gives them to them. And that's a fact.
Right, thank you for that, Sami. Question for Sami. All right.
Okay, I wanted to make a point. You said that about evolution. You said it's all about survival. In fact, it's nothing to do with survival. Evolution is all about reproductive fitness. It's your ability to reproduce your genes over time. And so it's not about survival. There's nothing in evolution that says you should go and kill other people or even harm other people. If altruism and empathy can increase your reproductive fitness, and there's very good evidence that they can, then evolution will create empathy and altruism. This is not about survival. There's nothing in evolution that says you should harm other people. That's just completely wrong.
Okay, evolution is not about survival. Okay, I have two atheists telling me something else. I'll send you the video where the atheist said it is about survival. Now, and I'm not saying you should kill people because of evolution. I'm not saying evolution tells you to kill people. I'm just looking at the logical implications. If evolution, and evolution is about surviving, evolving, why do we evolve? For the better, not to regress, but to progress, to ensure our survival. It's all about survival. So if evolution is all about survival, and if this world is all about materialism, materialistic, then if I'm just about survival, I shouldn't help someone else who is going to diminish my survival chances. That contradicts the very core of evolution. Now, as you know, we have limited resources on this planet and an unlimited growth of population. You put the two together, it equals extinction, because limited resources, unlimited people equals no more resources. So therefore, my survival chances are gone. So in the interests of survival, I should not help these people. It's all about survival. It's all about progression. If I help these people, I diminish my survival chances. And evolution, we evolved not to die, but we evolved to survive in our conditions that we're living by. We evolved to adapt to our conditions. But now if I give you my resources, or to those people, we can't adapt. Our habitat is going to go away. We're going to die. And then the whole point is meaningless. So by implication, we shouldn't hurt them, but we shouldn't help them. There's no reason to help them at all. From a logical perspective, there's no reason to help them at all. I mean, realistically, from a materialistic worldview, why should you help someone else? If you help him, that diminishes your own survival. Logically, it doesn't make any sense from a materialistic worldview.
Okay, thank you for that, Sami. Farhan, would you like to make a comment?
Can I let him make a comment?
You let him make a comment?
I'm going to let him.
Delegating your comment.
Yeah.
Okay, Farhan number 2.
Okay, just the thing about the technology and so on. It's not true that what you say, because technology can increase the ability of a population to survive. So it does. You don't have to reduce the population, but more importantly, you can increase your reproductive fitness by being empathetic. So if you care about your offspring, then you will have more offspring, because if you don't care about them, you abandon them. And so particularly in social animals, empathy has a huge evolutionary advantage. So in fact, you have lots of reasons to help other people, because evolution creates certain traits. It doesn't create a specific way of thinking, it creates traits. So a trait is empathy. And in fact, what happens is it creates regions of the brain, like mirror neurons, and there's other regions of the brain, that enable you to be empathetic. And if those regions are damaged, either through genetic mutation or maybe some accident, there's very good documentation for this, then you don't become empathetic. You don't care about other people. And you actually have an explanation now for evil, which is actually useful because you can actually treat it. And I'd love to know actually what you think of the studies that show that psychopathy has a very large genetic component to it. No, you don't like the consequences of that because it means people are not to blame, but whether something's true is nothing to do with the consequences if it's true. It's whether the evidence is there. So there is a lot of evidence there, and I'd like to know what you think of it.
All right, to the first point, it's not wrong. You can easily go just type in population control or overpopulation. There are so many scientific studies that show this planet is getting overpopulated. It doesn't matter what technology you have. Resources are naturally made, and it doesn't matter what technology you have. You can't replace natural resources. Now, as for the second point, that we're biologically made that way, it might be in our genes or what have you, that's another big problem for you, because if I'm biologically made to be a psychopath, a murderer, then I'm not evil. I was predetermined biologically to be that way. So therefore, I shouldn't be hated upon. I shouldn't be punished. And that example he brought up of Joseph Fritzl shouldn't even be brought up, because he was making an argument of emotion, saying, imagine that raped girl, how she felt. He's trying to make a point that it was bad. But why is it bad if he was biologically made that way? If you're biologically made that way and you have no control of it, then you can't be evil. Now, I obviously don't believe in that, because I believe you have a choice to not act on those urges. In fact, I personally know someone, and he does too. We debated him. I'm not going to name him, but he claims to be a psychopath, a sociopath. And he actually went to prison for committing a very violent, heinous act. But he doesn't do that anymore. He has suppressed those desires. And many other people out there are able to suppress such psychopathic, sociopathic desires. At the end of the day, we have the choice to reject those urges that we might have biologically. But you're not pushed to act on them. I don't believe biologically you're controlled like a robot. I believe at the end of the day, you have the choice to not act on those urges. I mean, we all have crazy urges sometimes, but we don't always act on them. We have a choice. But again, lastly, if we don't have the choices and everything is biologically predetermined, then again, evil doesn't exist. And then there is no problem.
Okay. All right then. I'll have a question for Farhan, please. Does anyone have a question for Farhan? You, sir.
Hi. I think we all agree that prevention is better than cure, as far as crime is concerned. If you were in charge, what deterrence would your worldview provide for crime? Because you just said something about quarantine. What you said about quarantine sounds like the current prison system. Right. But I think a recreational sadistic criminal who's calculatingly doing crime would think to himself, the worst that can happen is I'll get quarantined, I'll pretend to recover, I'll go back and continue doing crime. So if he goes into your quarantine system and gets rehabilitated, he might just be pretending to be getting rehabilitated. So how would you guarantee, do you consider your model a deterrent to crime? Because if somebody knows he's going to get his head chopped off, he ain't going to do it. No matter how barbaric it is, and no matter how disturbed he is, he still doesn't want to get his head lopped off. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, remember we were talking about the difference between retribution and consequentialism.
Yeah,
as the two models for criminal justice.
We're rewarding consequentialism.
Consequentialism actually advocates deterrent punishments. It advocates deterrent punishments in order to deter people from wanting to do those crimes while they're in society. Yeah. Now, I mean, personally, I mean, to go through all of the crimes and try to come out for a deterrent, I think that would be exhausting. But I mean, I don't think that I'm in the position to, nor am I well studied in criminology and criminal law to be able to think, or especially spontaneously think that this should be the punishment for this. But in the end, when we're talking about rehabilitation, in a person coming out, pretending. Right now, and they're just buying time. They go in there, they actually learn how to become a worse criminal and then come out. And for the ones who they're shanked, they're raped, this is a type of criminal justice or a jailing system that I wouldn't agree with either. What I'm saying is that we have to realize that they don't deserve to be tortured. They don't deserve to go into jail and to experience all that. Rather, they need to be rehabilitated. And by quarantine, I mean quarantining a virus, isolating that person from society, protect society from that person. That's essentially, in my view, I think that type of an isolation makes sense, but not the current jail where a person is shanked and raped and whatnot. A different model, a different building, different clinicians, treatment, not officers with batons and mace that go and beat a person who is clearly sick. Just a different system. Can I be creative right now? I don't think I have the mind to do it. But maybe we can discuss that later on. Okay. But that's the idea. It's not a jail, but some type of rehabilitation facility where shank and rape and that type of thing doesn't go on.
Okay, thank you. And make a comment to that question.
That's a good point he brought up. Remember the case of Austria, the girl who was raped. He brought up that example. Now I'm going to bring it up to you as well. Imagine how she felt being raped by that monster, by that criminal psychopath, day after day. Imagine her screams. In his system, he wouldn't punish that rapist. He would just send him to a rehabilitation program, fix him up, and then put him in open society.
No.
Think about that. Now, in the theist position, we say that man's going to be punished. There's going to be a major retribution for him. So, which is really the evil? Which is the wrong position? He keeps talking about God and evil. In his worldview, these 6 psychopaths will simply go get treated, and most likely, after they're mentally or physically fixed, they will be put out on the streets. But in our view, God, who's supposedly the bad one, the dictator, why doesn't he prevent evil and all of this and that? He will punish these people for their evil. And just think about that for a second.
Can I say something or no?
Wait, okay, sure.
Sami, is that okay? Well, I was going to say that's a misrepresentation of my worldview. I never said that somebody who commits a grievous criminal act will be released back into society after we quote-unquote fix them. And I said in my previous statement as well that certain people are going to require isolation for life, rehabilitation for life, but in a humane way. That doesn't mean that we let him out back into society given his psychological illness, given his psychopathology. That doesn't make sense because he's going to go back and do the same thing again. Why? Because he has an illness, because he's sick. So he doesn't deserve to be tortured because he's the unfortunate product of certain circumstances. If that was you who had psychopathology, and you responded to the impulse, which means there's no cognitive process there. You simply act on impulse. If that was you, do you think that you deserve to be tortured if your actions were a result of an illness?
If my actions were based on an impulse and I hurt somebody, then yes, I do deserve to be punished. And I'm saying this consciously with all of it. I have a choice not to do bad. But now again, your system is still an oppression. Because according to you, number one, we don't even punish these people. So think about that. Joseph Fritzl in his system shouldn't be punished. That's not debated. Secondly, he says we should send them to be fixed and rehabilitated. But now, what if you do fix them? What if you do cure them? You're still going to keep them locked up? That's an oppression right there as well. So you're going to lock up people who you don't even feel should be there because they were preconditioned to do that act. So that's a worse oppression. So again, your points are full of inconsistencies if we look at it. How can you punish someone who you've cured of a disease that made him do that bad? That doesn't make sense. You should free him and you should say, you were the victim, now you're more than free to go into society because we have fixed you up.
Okay. All right, the last round of questions. And anyone has a question for Sami? I think there was, did you have a question?
Yeah, one thing you said that you think murder is wrong. But this would be a contradiction to what's in the Quran, because if you look in the Quran, there's murder all over the place. You got the firstborn children of Egypt, you got Sodom and Gomorrah, you got Iram, you got the Midianites, and that's murder committed by Allah. So what you're saying is you disagree with Allah's morality, and what it actually implies is your morals are superior to Allah's, because you realize, living in the society that you live in, that is wrong. I'd like you to answer that, please.
All right. There's usually context to statements. When you have many people saying murder is wrong, but they'll still go fight for a just cause. So that's the difference. Murder as in just murdering, as in murdering innocent, murdering, killing bad people. Like, let me give you an example. Killing Joseph Fritzl is not wrong. So that's the point. So if you kill someone who deserves to be killed, like Joseph Fritzl, that is not wrong. But murder generally, just killing 6 million Jews just because they're Jews and they're supposedly an inferior race to you, that is wrong. Simply killing someone because they're not Muslim, as some Muslims think, that is wrong. You can't just simply kill people for the sake of doing it. That's the point to that statement.
Okay, no. So sorry. No heckling.
Yes, it was. Let me answer. It was just. But I just explained the context. Why you want to ignore the context?
What's the context?
The context, I said that people, if there are people who are deserving of it, and they're not innocent.
Okay, everyone, please, order. Okay, please.
Yeah, let me just
answer.
Order.
Okay, finish your response, and I'm going to pass the phone.
We have systems where criminals are punished, death penalty. But if you're an innocent person, you should not be punished. That's the point. Everyone understands that statement. There are politicians back in the 40s used to say that murder is wrong, but they went to war with Nazi Germany. Does that mean they're contradicting themselves? It's not a contradiction when you say murder is wrong, but then you fight in a just cause, or you punish a criminal, or you punish someone who deserves to be punished. It's very simple. I think everyone gets the point.
All right, Farhan, Farhan's comment. It's Farhan's comment.
We'll talk after. Okay, I think this is what they're discussing is an issue of moral relativism versus moral absolutism, right? So, is murder wrong? Is stealing wrong? Is, you can list any type of evil or wrong that you can think of. Is it wrong? But what Sami's response is that in some cases it's wrong, but in some cases it's okay. And that's relativism, which is completely in contradiction with the theistic absolutism that they normally posit. Now, as far as the other issue is, in terms of choice and psychological disturbance, when there's a psychological disturbance, choice is out of the window. It becomes obsolete at that point. And so when you're dealing with somebody who's killing somebody because of their illness, because of their psychological disturbance, because of their psychopathology, they're really not choosing to do so, but rather the overwhelming circumstances, including genetics, including brain states, including brain physiology, including brain chemistry, including human conditioning, is causing them to do that. And hence, each and every situation, which is I would agree with him, is relative. But I think that the Quran, when it says in certain situations, go ahead and kill in this situation, that it's by principle saying that murder is not evil. It's relative. Relative.
Okay, thank you. All right, and the final question to Farhan Qureshi before the summaries. Any question for Farhan Qureshi? I'm sorry, cameraman is exempt. I'm sorry. No, because then you have to film yourself then asking the question.
I just have a question for really in general for both speakers, but I'd like Farhan Qureshi. Now, clarify me please in layman's terms, like when you say you're a determinist, is that the same as like an individual making a premeditated decision, meaning they're fully aware of what they're doing before, and fully realizing the consequences, but accepting the consequences? Because if God to you is evil, then surely if you're in evolution, then nature itself is evil. And it's only the survival of the fittest. This is what evolution's about, isn't it? I mean, that's what I got taught in even though I don't believe in that, that's what I got taught in school, that basically it's the animal is the survival of the fittest, and we're animals in Darwin's theory, based on the Natural History Museum, but based on the evidence of dinosaurs and what we see. So I'd just like to know, from your perspective, if you could clarify what do you mean by that view of, like, you know, deterministic view, you know.
Thank you.
The definition of determinism is simple. There's either a cause or multiple causes to why you're doing what you're doing in terms of human behavior. And those causes have to be antecedent, come before the immediate behavior that you're exhibiting, the immediate quote-unquote choice that you're making. So it's caused, right? Does that make sense?
Okay.
So in that sense, it's determined to happen because of those causal factors. So the person who's killing in the isolated situation, the person who kills, there has to be a number of different reasons, a number of different causes, should I say, for why he's exhibiting that behavior. And therefore, it's not his fault. He was conditioned by his environment, and of course we have the genetic component as well. And that's the difference there. Psychologists will posit that there's both nature and nurture. And when we're talking about nature, that's when we're talking about evolution. When we're talking about environment or nurture, that's when we're talking about social construct. Together they bring about our sense of morality. Together they bring up our sense of empathy and conscience. Together they bring about our understanding of a rational approach to morality. Not because some book says so from 2,000 years ago, but because it rationally makes sense.
To that?
It rationally makes sense also for Hitler to do what he did. It rationally makes sense for all those evil people to do what they did based on his methodology. And that point has been proven in tonight's debate, throughout the debate. So therefore, by his definition, there is no evil. Because number one, we're all biologically predetermined to do this, based on biological evolution, and based on our society. So, you know, we shouldn't be punished for anything. Everything is subjective. And so basically, in their worldview, evil does not exist. So therefore, Farhan, you have no right to ask God why he allows suffering or evil when, according to your criteria and your methodology, these terms don't even exist and these terms don't even have any meaning. And thirdly, by your own criteria, these terms are actually justified. You know, in a way they are justified because you were biologically made that way. So it's not really suffering. It's not really evil. If biology determined you to be like that, then that's not really evil. It was just made that way. You can't really argue against it, you know. You were just made that way biologically, so it's not your fault, so we can't really complain. So therefore, evil doesn't exist. So that would be their answer to evil. There is no evil, basically.
Okay. Well, thank you for that comment, Sami. We're now going to have the final summaries of both speakers. You will be free to approach the speakers afterwards and ask questions and heckle them in person. But for now, we'll finish off with the summaries in reverse order. So, would you like to go? 5 minutes.
You went first. 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. A good book that I recommend for us to understand what morality is from a scientific viewpoint is Sam Harris's book called The Moral Landscape. And I also recommend you watching his debate with William Lane Craig on the very subject of morality from a scientific standpoint. And in that book and in his debate, he argues the same thing, that it doesn't take a lot of mental gymnastics to come to the understanding that human suffering is bad. And think about the worst possible scenario of suffering. It doesn't take a genius or a rocket science to realize that this is something that's undesirable. This is something that we don't want for ourselves, for our family, or for anybody else. This is a rational, deductive way of looking at human suffering. If somebody is suffering, if somebody is experiencing suffering, that we would want to alleviate this. And that is the definition of evil that we're using today. It's the unnecessary causing of suffering on sentient beings. And so how can we alleviate that? This is what we're talking about is evil. When we talk about evil, we're talking about human behavior. We can't get away from it. If we're talking about human behavior, we have to go to the behavioral sciences, psychology, sociology, neuroscience. And from that, we understand why human beings are behaving the way that they're behaving. And what is causing their behavior to be the way that it is. And our criminal justice systems, the way that we respond to that, has to reflect the empirical and scientific evidence that we have. Not because a book from 2,000 years ago or 1,400 years ago says so, but because we can realize through deduction and induction that human suffering is undesirable, it's bad, it's not something that we would wish upon anyone, especially ourselves. And so, again, the problem of evil, which is the original topic, not morality, we're not debating morality, this is a tangent that we've gone on, is why would God allow evil? No answer was given. If God is able to alleviate all of the suffering and evil in the world that we have, why doesn't he do it? Why did he create it in the first place? Why does he maintain it and sustain it in the first place? God created Satan. Why did God allow Satan to do what Satan is doing? Why does God maintain and sustain his existence? Or if you want to call it he. This is something that God is choosing to do as an external personality, or as a free personality. This is God's choice to allow this. And this is a topic that we've completely strayed from and hasn't been dealt with, except for the single theodicy of free will. That if we have free will, then God is not accountable. But that's what I'm questioning here today. What is free will? And to what extent? If we have all of this determinism, if we have a diagnostic statistics manual that defines that these are illnesses in the brain causing your behavior, then how are you at fault? You don't have a choice. You are overwhelmed. Your choice becomes obsolete. You're overwhelmed by your circumstances, as unfortunate and sad as that sounds. That's the reality that we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Farhan. I will now pass it to Sami to make his final 5-minute summary. Just press the button when you're ready.
All right. I'd first like to just present this paper. It's by Dr. W.R. Clem, which is peer-reviewed. And it basically shows that all this neuroscience he's talking about, everything's biologically predetermined. It's not actually as solid or consistent as he's trying to make it out to be. And you can just view yesterday's debate, the one he had with Abdullah, and he already went through it. So these arguments that he's even making is not a major consensus as he's trying to make it be. But nonetheless, he asks, or he makes the claim that I didn't answer his question. I answered it at least 3 times in tonight's debate, and it's been recorded. I already answered why evil exists, and you even quoted my answer. There's free will. So how is it possible that I didn't answer a question in which you gave my answer? I don't understand. But your other question is, why doesn't he do something about it? I answered that as well. Because it would be completely meaningless to have paradise. It would be completely meaningless to have good if there was no evil. I answered that as well. So there's no point to repeat myself. So answers were given. Now, as to the agnostic side, in tonight's debate, the problem of evil, no consistent definition was given. And I'm happy about that. Because this isn't just a problem Farhan has. This is a problem his entire side has. And they've been doing this for too long, trying to bash theists over the head with the problem of evil, when in fact it's not our problem, it's their problem, because they can't even define it. And when they define it, their answer makes the problem worse. According to Farhan's definition, Joseph Fritzl was not really an evil man, because he was biologically made that way, mixed with his social conditions. And he should just be sent so he can be fixed. And even after he's fixed, Farhan will still keep him quarantined. That's his view of a just system. I think we all know the answer to, I think we all know what we think of a system like that. And in my worldview, which is supposedly the bad one, which Farhan wants to attack God for, in my worldview, evil people will be punished. They won't simply be able to say, oh, I have some biological condition, which isn't even agreed upon according to the studies. They won't be able to use that excuse. At the end of the day, we all have impulses. You don't need a science to tell you that. You have your own personal experiences. We all have urges that we have, but we don't act on them. You are your best test, and you are your best witness. Not some studies that they keep making. Just because we have urges doesn't mean we should start acting on them. Now, we both agree on evil. We both agree unnecessary harm. But his definitions are meaningless because he goes on to contradict himself. He says unnecessary. But according to who? According to him. According to Hitler, according to other bad people, their evil actions were not evil. Their actions were perfectly necessary according to their worldview. Just because you don't think it's necessary does not count for them. Everything is subjective. And by that definition, evil does not exist. And lastly, I wanted to bring this point up before, to completely refute it. He keeps saying we're conditioned by society. I've already addressed that. But the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is actually a refutation to that. The pagan Arab society used to bury their daughters alive. The Prophet Muhammad barred that custom. The pagans used to look down upon the poor people. The Prophet went against that social tradition. The pagans offered the Prophet all the benefits of his social conditions, of his social life, and he rejected it. Europe used to be pagan. We see changes, we always see people going against the social conditions of which they were brought in. So that argument doesn't even make sense from an empirical view. You can just view history. So according to the materialistic worldview, which he comes from, we should not help people because everything is according to biological evolution, and evolution is all about survival. So I shouldn't help a man who's going to diminish my resources, which infringes on my rights. It is only through a metaphysical worldview that good and bad and evil make sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you to both our speakers for presenting an interesting event, and that as it's been quite a interesting discussion. Hope you can take some lessons home with you and give you more food for thought. If you've enjoyed this event and you'd like to see more events, please help MDI to continue its work by making a donation at the donation bin at the back. For more information on the next coming debates over the next 4 months, please visit our website at www.thedebateinitiative.com. That's www.thedebateinitiative.com. And if anyone hasn't done so, please put your email on our mailing list and to receive upcoming in-dates or updates of any new events and lectures that we'll be performing. So thank you once again for coming, and thank you again for both our speakers.